Hey everybody, welcome back. So while the backs are drying from their glue up, I figured I'd get on to making the supports that bridge between the top of each cabinet and the the desktop itself. So all of this is going to be way easier before I glue the boxes up. So I figured this would be a good time to get onto it. However, the material that I want to use is this 50 mil thick stuff that I have for the desktop itself. But obviously, I need to get it all cut up into pieces so I can put it through my jointers and my planers. So I figure while I'm at it, I'll do two birds with one stone, get these cut to the right width so they're ready to be milled up for the desktop, and then the offcuts will be good for me to use for these little spacer blocks that will be going between the desktop and the top of the cabinets. So it's just the same old story with this lot. Get one nice flat face and then flip it over and get an adjacent square edge, and then send it off to the thickness planer to get a parallel flat face to the first one, and then head on over to the table saw to rip them down to the dimensions that I need. Now that those are sorted, I can set up my crosscut sled, cut off one nice square end, and then once I've done those, I'll flip them over, drop down my stop block to give me an exact length and keep everything uniform, and then trim off the excess. To help me out on installation day, I've decided to route in a shallow 3mm recess on each side of the top to receive these two standoffs. And to help me do so, I'm just sticking down a scrap piece of MDF as a straight edge to ride the side of my router alongst against. And then once I've done one pass, I'll scoot it over to do the second one, and then I just need to hog out the excess material. Because the router bit leaves a radiused edge in the corners, I need to come back in with my chisels and square them off, and then clean off any fuzzies left over from hogging everything out, scrape down the surface and give it a quick sand to make it nice and clean. So I've got all four of these little 3mm recesses routed in to the two tops of the cabinets that will go under the desk. So they're still a little bit too tight at the moment to fit these standoffs that the desk will be sitting on top of. So I'll get my trusty Kana out, chuck it in the vise, plane those down so they're a nice fit, and then I'll be drilling a few holes through and putting in some threaded inserts. So these will stay attached to the underside of the desktop, and then when the boxes are put in place, the desktop will come down, sit on top, and then get attached from underneath with these screws and threaded inserts into these standoffs. So after a few minutes on the Kana, those are a nice fit, not too tight but not too loose, so they'll make a good registration on installation day. Now I just need to drill a series of countersinks and through holes through the top panels of each box. That's to receive the machinist screw that will be going into the threaded insert on the underside of each one of those standoffs. When I'm doing so, I always like to drill the holes a little bit oversized. That means that the bolts have wiggle room to account for seasonal movement, just the expansion and contraction as the timber moves throughout the seasons. I also like when I'm doing a through hole in a panel that I can't put a sacrificial piece right under where I'm drilling through. I like to do a little bit from each side and meet in the middle, and that way I don't have the risk of a massive amount of tear out when the drill bit pokes through to the other side. Now I just need to do a little bit of cleanup and put a light chamfer on each of the holes just to stop the bolts from snagging in when they're coming in and out. Now I'm ready to mark the location on the standoffs where I'm going to be drilling and placing the threaded inserts. To do so, I just put them back in place, clamp them down, and then using the same drill bit that I used to drill the through holes, I'm going to put them back in the hole, tap them with a mallet, and then that transfers a point onto the standoffs where I will then take off to the drill press and get them drilled in, ready for the threaded inserts. Because the threaded inserts have a flange top on them, I need to do a pretty substantial countersink to make sure it will receive the head of the threaded insert and then sit flush on the underside of each of these standoffs. So I'll just whiz those in and then drive one or two of them in just to make sure I've got those sorted, and then it's pretty much done. Obviously I'll have to go through the same process for attaching them to the underside of the desktop, but I can wait until that's all been glued up and finalised before I do so. In the next episode, I'm going to be moving on to making some custom clamping cauls to assist me in gluing up these boxes. I'll get the backs ripped off those two visible sides for the pull-out back sort of slide-out thing, and then I'll be able to actually get them glued up.